Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I am, of course, your host with the most, Phil Better. And today we have a special guest, an OG, if you will, of digital entrepreneurship, working since 2010, taught thousands of highly sensitive entrepreneurs and leaders from around the globe to release lifelong limited beliefs, overcoming fears, and develop new leadership skills in order to excel in business. They are the founder of A Course in Business Miracles, a former drama teacher, which I'm super excited. I'm probably just going to geek out on the drama side, so I apologize. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Heather to the show. Heather, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Phil. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
I am too. So I read off a bit of your bit of a bio here that you shared with me. Didn't even touch on the fact that you won Best Manhattan Coaching Award in 2015, probably along with other crazy achievements in your life. So I wanted you to just quickly introduce yourself to my audience.
Sure, happy to. So first of all, just because I'm celebrating my 20th anniversary, I've actually been self-employed since 2003, and I've been serving highly sensitive entrepreneurs since 2010. So I always like to plug the 20-year mark because it's just amazing. I know.
It
Thank
is.
you so much. And yes, I was a former high school English and drama teacher in my former career, my former life. And I enjoy every aspect that comes with being an entrepreneur, including, the challenges that I've absolutely had to weather multiple times over since 2003. And I'm looking forward to diving in and talking about all of it together today.
So let's start at the beginning. So you were a drama English teacher. Were you doing side hustling on the side? That's how you started this world? Or did you in 20 years ago, you're like, peace out, no longer a teacher, I'm going full on digital entrepreneur?
Well, let's talk about the digital aspect for a second.
Okay.
Just kind of try to remember 2003 because it's amazing in my mind, like what has transpired digitally since that time. So first of all, there was no social media, like shut the front door, right? Like no Facebook, no YouTube, no what? And I remember my first website, I actually learned HTML code myself to be able to get my first website up. So it was not the digital aspect that attracted me at all. I have literally learned along the way with like each new digital iteration that's, been invented and continues to evolve, with every breath we take, it seems like. So from there, I actually loved my work as a high school drama and English teacher, loved my students so deeply, and was very, very frustrated with the confinement of the school system. And also, when I started my business in 2003, I was still teaching, and I had a transition year of working with clients, which I was working in person at that time, a couple nights a week and one weekend day. And then in 2004, I went full time with my business. And my first business was actually as a nutrition and wellness coach. And nobody even really knew what coaching was at that time.
Yeah, no,
like
it was.
Has changed. I hope I look younger than I am sounding right now.
You look, I'm not going to lie. I would put you still in your early 30s from talking with you.
Okay.
When you said you were in 2003, I'm like, I'm not going to answer how old I was in 2003 because I could have been one of your students.
I would not be surprised.
But yes, so you decided to be a nutrition coach when there was no such thing as well-known coaches. Obviously, there were coaches, but they were out into the extremes. Not every day people would hear about them
Yes.
as they do now.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. 100%. That is totally true. And when I think back and what is it that really kind of inspired me to take this leap, which it really was, it's probably a combination of, just complete naivete at the time. And then also the start of my business was on the heels of 9/11 and living and teaching in New York City. And I lived just barely a mile from ground zero. And where I taught was not much further north than that. And the impact, I mean, of course, for all of us, no matter where we were, was
Mhm.
immense. But definitely for those of us living in the city at that time, there was a real sense of like, what are you doing with your life and what needs to change? And so that was really a big impetus to kind of just, kick me out of that employed nest and, yeah, and bring me to where I am today.
So yeah, you started your fitness journey. Whoop, get the camera to there we go. Get the fitness journey started, and then you transitioned to helping highly sensitive people. How did you move into that transitioning into helping highly sensitive people?
Yes, such a great question. So, my first business as a nutrition and wellness coach was really because I just had a passion for like healthy eating and well living. And I attended a certification program in the evenings while I was still teaching. And that was just really for my own personal interest, is where it started. And then, as part of that program, they were like, oh, well, and if you want to make this into a business, you can do this extra course. And I was like, what? A business? That's so interesting. Um, and so I took that course and followed those steps. And that was, again, the beginning. And also, again, complete naivete. And so I just jumped in and learned so much, being absolutely terrified the majority of the time, like high anxiety, like panic attacks, terror. And and through that, I really turned to my spiritual practice that has been with me since I was 14, when I lost my mother, and that is A Course in Miracles. And so I really used my spiritual practice to support me with the terror of being self employed. And then other practitioners in the wellness realm started asking me like, oh, like, how are you doing this full time, right? Like I would meet them like networking and things like that. And so I just started to share a little bit of what I was doing. And then eventually like some of those connections started asking me like, oh, can I coach with you? Like not on like nutrition, like I know what to do there, but like I would really like to know like what you're doing with your business. So that was kind of the first step, the first transition. And then years later, around 2008, 2009, I learned that I was a highly sensitive person. And I was really struggling in my business at the time, not financially. I had actually brought my business across the seven-figure mark for the first time, but it was far from like exciting or enjoyable. It was actually felt completely like soul crushing. And I was overwhelmed and overexhausted and questioning like, like, ugh, I don't know if I'm still supposed to do this. And if I'm not doing this, then what am I supposed to do? And through that process, learned again that I was a highly sensitive person. And that changed everything. I really started looking at my business differently and realized I needed to go about my business differently as a person who was highly sensitive. I started making those changes, was a lot happier, a lot more profitable. And then similarly, I started sharing what I was doing for myself with others. And that was really the start of what is now the highly sensitive leadership training programs.
I love it. And when you switched into this coaching highly sensitive individuals, entrepreneurs, and leaders,
Mhm.
did you feel a reignition of the passion that you had when you first started?
My gosh, I so appreciate that question. No one has ever asked me that. And the answer is yes. Yes, I did. Yes, it was absolutely a a reignition for sure of like, oh, okay, this makes sense. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I am very, very passionate about this. Yes.
Awesome. I love that because it shows that like for listeners that you can start in one area but that's okay to transition and try something new because maybe it will be the passion that lights you up, the passion that is like, hey, this is what I was meant to do. And since 2010, apparently it's been going good for you. Um,
Yes. Yes.
Winning awards. What was it like winning the Manhattan Coaching Award?
It was a combination of, feeling very validated for what I was doing. And then I also just remember the award ceremony feeling like super awkward. That's probably because
a
I'm
bit of like
person.
imposter syndrome at that point.
Yeah, not so much that, but just like just being in the spotlight, right? And it's like it's just not what motivates me. It's not what drives me. So the getting the fancy dress, the big ballroom, the like getting your photo taken. I was like, I am not Beyonce. Like, what are we doing here? Like, it's just weird. But I'm so grateful, and I'm really, really appreciative for the acknowledgement. That means a lot to me. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. No, and it's well deserved.
Thank you.
Because you're helping people like who are needing the help that you provide.
Thank you.
And speaking of those people, do you have a tip for them? So when they're either maybe feeling overwhelmed or if they're starting a new project, something that could help them through that?
I really appreciate what you just said a moment ago regarding highlighting that where you start might not be where you stay. And I would say that is very, very key because to me, that is the essence of being an entrepreneur. And what I find, especially for those who are highly sensitive, is there's a tendency to strive for getting it perfect before it gets launched. And in truth, especially again, for those of us who are highly sensitive, though we have a shadow side of striving for that perfectionism and allowing that to hold us back through analysis paralysis, a strength side is that we're naturally very creative. So if you look at your business as a flexible, fluid, creative process that can support with alleviating the anxiety and the pressure that comes from when you're striving for perfect.
Sorry, there's just a bit of construction. Give me one moment.
That's okay. I live in New York City, so
yeah, you're probably like construction. I didn't even hear it.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of like just sirens. It just doesn't even register anymore.
It's the white noise of living in a city. With what you're doing right now, how would yourself 20, 30 years ago look at you? Like what kind of conversation would you have with them?
Such good question. Oh my gosh. Myself 20 years ago would just, first of all, it would be like, what do you mean you work on your phone?
What is this phone you speak of? First of all,
what are you saying? 30 years ago, she would just be like, stop telling me lies, and why are you trying to make me believe this story that just can't possibly be true? I have to say there would just be like a real level of doubt probably 30, 20 years ago that where I am now is the life that I'm living. However, if in that conversation, myself now would share with 20, 30 years ago self that you really committed to doing the inner and the outer work every step of the way to get to where you are 20 to 30 years from now, that I think would really have an impact on my younger self. And she then would believe that, like, okay, this actually might be possible.
Now, since you've been able to spend a large period of time in the digital entrepreneur world, you have 20 decades of experience, which is
Dinosaur.
you're not a dinosaur, you're still young, because the digital world only started like 30 years ago, if we think about it, in the 90s. So you're not a dinosaur. It's younger than I am, and it's younger than us. So you're in the prime of the entrepreneurial space for the digital, because you're here for the next evolution, because you've been through already at least 3 evolutions of the internet.
Yeah, it's true.
So I want to ask you, do you have a memory from that time that cements the reason why you decided either to come into this journey as a entrepreneur, or more specifically a digital entrepreneur?
Yes. Well, again, when I started my business, there really wasn't this concept of digital. So I'm going to share 2 memories. So one was when I decided early on to let my in-person office go and move all of my client sessions on to the phone. And I was like so nervous. I was like, oh my God, like no one is ever going to work like this. And yet just intuitively, like I knew that made more sense for many reasons. And all my clients came with me, and I've never looked back. And that was probably 2005. It was early on that I made that shift. And then the second is when I remember I discovered this thing called email newsletters. And I was like, wait, what? Like you can just like reach all of these people like all at once. And then I saw that people were like selling using these email newsletters, and it was very exciting. It was really exciting. And I remember like the first online sale that I got when I had someone like probably register for a class or something. And yeah, I mean, it felt like gold at like, the end of the rainbow. I was like, this is amazing. Oh, I can't hear you.
It's because there was construction. I muted myself and forgot that I didn't unmute myself.
Yes.
So I love how you're highlighting the first purchase that happened with your digital course, or the product you were selling, because a lot of entrepreneurs remember that first time, that first sale, the first client they got, and that proved that, hey, doing something online is possible. So I want to thank you for that. And also that transition, just showcasing how we're moving more and more to this remote, like people can live in their house and work with people all around the world. We don't need to be in person.
Totally.
So changing that. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yes. Well, before I answer that, I feel like it would be valuable to just speak a little bit more to like that first online sale. I don't want to be a disservice to people who are
of course
listening, because I often am concerned by the level of misrepresentation of the digital space, and that there's a lot of people out there who are like selling a quick fix or a quick income increase. And so when it comes to that first digital sale, I just don't want to misrepresent that, from then on forth, money just poured into my email and into my account. Because I really do feel like that's a major disservice to those who are starting out, and that often the reality of the work that goes into using the digital space as a tool, not the business as itself. If you are service-based, I mean, if you're selling bracelets online, then that's probably, something different. It's not gonna change the level of work that needs to go in, but I just feel like that's valuable to speak to. So from there, 5 years from now, so one, I'm super excited. My first book just came out in December, and I have another book that's in the works, and I am really committed to continuing to grow the Highly Sensitive Leadership Revolution, which is the subtitle to my first book, and empowering those of us who are highly sensitive that we can absolutely be financially successful as people who are self-employed and be contributing to the world through our unique lens of leadership. So I see myself just continuing to do the work.
I love that. And I love to see you reach that goal. Okay. Just to make sure, sorry. To reach that goal, if you had to go back and redo everything, would you still follow the same path you did, or would you change anything?
I would still follow the same path because it's just what has led me to where I am. And I think there's such value in that flexibility and that fluidity that I was speaking about earlier, and being willing to be in the process and follow the breadcrumbs. And I'm just not sure doing it any other way would really produce anything of better value. Different, sure, but can't necessarily say better.
Okay. Good. We're going to move on to the spark question of the show. It's from Seek Discomfort. Sorry about that. They're from Seek Discomfort. We want to spark conversations between strangers, because strangers are just friends you haven't met yet. So I would like to know, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oh my gosh, the best piece of advice I've ever been given. Okay, I'm just going to go with what came into my mind because I've learned that's often the best. So I flashed back to my second grade teacher. My second grade teacher, Miss Yanklowitz. And it actually didn't come from her, but it came from an experience in her classroom, which I was held in from recess because I had colored outside the lines in my coloring assignment. And I don't know if anyone said anything specifically. I remember my dad did get on the phone with her, and there was like a conversation that happened. But that experience really stayed with me. And I'd love to say, like, from that day forth, I always colored outside the lines. But that's not true. It took me a long time to get back to that place of being willing to color outside the lines. So that's what I'm going with. That's my answer.
I love that. That's such a different, unique. Oh, I like that. Oh my God, that's so great. And it shows how big of an impact, like at an early age, someone saying don't color outside the lines can affect the rest of our lives. So with that said, I'm going to jump off the screen here. I want to let you have the last little bit, let my audience know where they can find you, how they can support you, all that fun stuff. So the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So appreciated our time together today. If what you've heard resonates with you in any way, you can definitely find out more at businessmiracles.com. You'll find some valuable free resources there and a great way to get started. And if you're definitely listening and thinking like, oh, I'd like to know more about what it is to be a highly sensitive entrepreneur, and if I am or am not one, then I would recommend the free resource of taking the Highly Sensitive Entrepreneur Quiz. And you can find that at hsequiz.com. So businessmiracles.com and hsequiz.com.
Awesome. Thank you. Ooh, yeah, I'm still going. Okay. Am I muted? No. Thank you so much, Heather, for that. I can't thank you enough for coming on to the show and dealing with the little technical difficulties and construction that I have going on today. I'm still glad we had a great conversation.
Yes.
To my audience, of course, as you know, in the show notes down below, you can find everything linking to Heather, to the Business Miracle, and of course, the quiz, so that you can see if you are a highly sensitive person and can get some coaching from Heather. So I want to thank you all for being here. Heather, again, it was a pleasure speaking with you. And remember, to my audience, to always invest in yourself. It's frozen. Great.